Let me tell you about Ed Whitoc. But first, NGC 3324. Feel like using that again because I used it for my book description videos, and this is kind of doing that. So the title of this video will be on my relationship with my stories, and I do have an associated Substack post that should have come out yesterday, or yesterday. I mean, I'll never get used to the flipping. Anyway, yeah, on my relationship with my stories, which, as I do explain in the post, and I'll try to explain here, that's basically my way of saying I have conversations with my stories, with my characters. I hear voices to a degree, but I'm not crazy, I promise. I'm not crazy. It's just that, sometimes the characters and the stories can be that powerful, can be that alive for me, that I can ask them questions and they give me answers. Or sometimes they just ask me questions that happened in failure. And I got like 2-3 chapters out of that because they asked me a question. It was a good question, so I had to answer it. It took 2-3 chapters to do. In A Letter from Catherine, a lot of that, literally a lot of it, especially because I didn't know the ending. But when I started writing, I just wrote a story. A lot of that was Roman, the main character in that, talking to me and sharing stories with me that I then wrote down. And also, had to think through. I mean, I guess a way to put it there is Roman was like a co-author. Obviously, he's just the main character. He's completely fictitious. But he was sufficiently alive for me that it was like we were writing it together, or he was telling me that I was transcribing. And definitely transcription is how this can feel at times. And that does relate to Ed Whitoc, who is a character in The Children of Many Gifts, a side character. Very important character, really. At least that's what he was meant to be. And he is introduced in chapter 2, so all the way up there. But I want to talk about something that happens in chapter 29. Chapter 28. This is, so I just, from chapter 2 to chapter 29. So what happens, what I want to talk about, it happens in 28. So it's like that thick, about a third of the book, between when I introduce the character for the singular and simple purpose of Constance is an English major. I took one English course in college. And that was like a dozen years before I started writing this book. I don't remember it. I mean, I remember a little bit of it, but not enough to accurately impersonate an English class, a creative writing class, a higher level creative writing class in a book. I couldn't do it accurately. So I was like, all right, well, what can I do for that? Because it's like, she's a writer, or that's the kind of thing she's going to want to be. She's not going to want to be a science. She's not all that interested in science. She is also in a physics class that is going on in the story, but she's not the smart one there. She's good. She's good, but she's not that good. She's not that good. But if it were a science background, that'd be easy. I have a science background. I could write about that easy. But she's doing English. She's more artsy, and that's good. That's how she is. That's who she is. Well, how can I get around putting her in an English class that I can't accurately describe? That I had to think on. And then it occurred to me, well, what if I just make the English class unusual? Okay, how can I do that? Have a guest speaker come in. That's who Ed Whitoc is. He's just an author, an experienced author that the professor for the class knows and invited in to talk to the class. Because, hey, I have a friend who's an experienced author. He can come in and tell you things. He can answer your questions. But Ed is unusual. So it's like, yes, I'm happy to come in and talk to you. And then he starts asking them questions. He's unusual, and that's just how he is. And oh man, that reminds me of another part of this. It's just, I'll get to it. It's all part of this. It's all part of this. He was meant completely as a throwaway character. But before long, I did, and I just, because I do have it written in here, I have him start with I had an idea for something I could do with him. Because he'd be throughout the book, if only so that I can say, yes, she is actually attending her English classes. I have him with, it's not exactly a mantra, I describe it like that. I mean, it's a mantra associated with him. which is about finding the line between fantasy and reality, which for him and his writing, he feels is very important, that you want to know what is and is not real. And that if you don't know, you risk falling prey to being overly fantastical, which can lose people. So as an author, he feels that this is very, very important. But Constance, this is a super fantasy story. She has a super ability that's starting to manifest. So this whole line is very blurry for her, or it's not where he would say it is. So I have him doing that, though, to be a balance, to be something of an emotional balance for her against what's going on with her abilities manifesting and meeting other people who also have abilities. Now, I'm not sure if now that was definitely like my idea, or at least my feeling for the character. What I don't know if it's my idea or not, it may have been my idea, it might have been the stories, was to actually have him have an ability as well that has manifested, but he's in denial. Or at least he doesn't want to acknowledge it. He might not be actively denying it, he might only be passively denying it. I think more so actively, to be honest. And technically that's a spoiler. And I do also put this in there. Technically that information is a spoiler, but it was kind of meant to be strongly hinted at. It's not really meant to be subtle. Not a twist. So, as the author, I deem it not a spoiler. I can do that, right? Anyway. Oh, now I'm trying to remember what was the other thing. Anyway. So why do I have to chapter 28 held here? Because, as I just said, that idea about him having an ability, I'm not sure if that is my idea or the story's idea. But in chapter 28, he meets another friend of Constance, who I don't want to name because that would be more of a spoiler. And they have a conversation. I like writing conversations, at least in some stories. It's kind of funny. The story I'm working on now, not so easy. But in any case, I like that. I like the back and forth. Because I can get a good flow going. Because it's like I'm just transcribing an actual conversation between two people that I'm just witnessing. But in this case, they are fictitious people. They're characters. They're just alive enough for me that I can do that. So I'm transcribing it, right? And legitimately, I did not plan out this conversation. I was just, idea came in from this person. It's like, write it out, because good idea. I would recognize it's a good idea. Then Ed suggests saying something, write it out. There's one thing that the other character, that one I don't want to name, asks him. And it was one of those when it came in, and I know it came into my mind. I didn't think, well, ultimately, yes, it was my idea. But I would still say, no, it was this other character that thought of it. Because I have the relationship with these characters. That it was from them. He was alive enough to give me that idea, and I immediately recognized its value and importance. And the funny part is, chapter 28, all the way over here, is when that question is asked. It concerns something introduced all the way back here in chapter 2 that I just put in there to make things easy. He writes with a pen name. He has a pseudonym. The reason I did that, same basic reason as why I have him in the English class, is to just make things easier on me. If they don't know the name that he writes under, the students, they can't ask about, what did you do in this title? I wouldn't have to worry about making up titles. Okay? I wouldn't have to do that. I wouldn't have to worry about what genre he writes in, none of it. I wouldn't need to. Because they just know him as an experienced author. They don't know what the books are, so they can't do research. And he's intentional about this. It's actually by accident, because the professor, who's known him for years, introduces him by his real name, not his pen name. And he's like, no, that's okay. Don't give him my pen name, because it's not important what I wrote. It's important that I wrote, essentially. And just that experience. And that's what he wants to pass on. Because, I mean, it's like, for me, if I were ever in that situation, which I doubt would ever happen, why would I want to be answering questions specifically about this book, unless you want to write this book? But why? It's already written. I wrote it. It's right here. It would be better for me to like share things like this. This is kind of what I'm trying to share here, is this ability for my writing, at least. And I hope it's, I don't know how unique it is. I don't know how common it is. I hope it's common, because it's a lot of fun. It's a lot more enjoyable because it flows. So, and the way I put it here, and I really, really like how I closed out the Substack post here. I am thankful for this, because it has consistently improved the story it has, and it is far more enjoyable to discover the story rather than just writing it. When you write it, you already know it, right? But when you're discovering it, you're finding things you didn't think of. And that's exactly what happens in chapter 28. I didn't think of these things. I did not plan for these things, but they all worked out. They all worked out because they flowed from the story itself. As I said, I was transcribing the conversation between these characters, more so than just writing it. Because the characters were alive enough, at least in that chapter, to give me both sides of it, along with their reactions. And it's also the specific question I'm referring to. That question came in. The thought was complete. The question and the response were completely together. And I recognized it was good. It was so good. And it really solidified certain aspects of the Ed character. And it also helps push forward part of how he is balancing for Constance, but perhaps shouldn't be. How basically he's not as good a model for her as some may want him to be. Which I guess, if I have to give that some larger point, is basically don't hero worship. I mean, it's good to learn from people with more experience, but don't necessarily put them too high on a pedestal. So it kind of would serve into that. But that's like I'm implying an interpretation there that I'm the author, I can say it's accurate, but that doesn't mean that's a core to it, a core element to it. So yeah, now I'm just trying to remember, what was it? There was another thing that Ed did that also gets taught, that there's questioning there. It's gone. I'd have to read through 28 and find it, and I would find it though. But yeah, it's just, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy when I hear these voices. It is just, I have a relationship with my stories. I'm able to ask them questions. They can answer the questions. And they can ask me questions, and then I have to answer them by writing chapters. And I don't remember, I've recorded this video a few times, or at least tried to. One thing with this, there were entire chapters that I only wrote because I didn't want to write to the next main point in the story, so I asked it, hey, story, question, what do you think I should write next? And it would tell me. And actually a few of those chapters were, hey, we haven't been in English class, what's up with Ed? So Ed very much was a character that was developed by the story more so than by me. And it's also not the only character like that. There's another, it's a little bit of a spoiler. Well, no, I don't really mind. I had a little bit in Substack, I pulled it out, but this, I can be quick with it. This character that I had in my mind, certain aspects of this character, he is not introduced until, I know, oh wait, no, I am actually in the wrong, in the 40s. Yeah, actually in chapter 46. Well, he's introduced at the end of chapter 45, but there's a character there that I already had thoughts on, I had ideas for, all the way back, like when I started writing this. But he wasn't solidified, he wasn't anything yet. He was completely nebulous, just I knew I would have him, and I knew what his ability would be. But then, I don't really, there's no way I could just like start reading out of this and give you what's going on there and have it make sense. But when he is introduced, and he does also introduce himself at the same time, that's when he clicked. That's when he solidified. And it was exactly, though, he introduced himself there. Like how he did that, even his name, I didn't really pick. Well, not fully. I knew part of it. But he just gave a name. It's like, yes, this is the character. The moment he gave the name, I knew him. I knew exactly who he was. I knew how he would behave going forward. I knew all of that. Because he told me. The story told me. I'm not crazy. I just hear the voices of my characters, and I typically stop hearing them after I finish writing. So I'm not crazy. No. I just have a relationship with my stories. I mean, come on, it's not that bad. Alright, I'll see you next time, though I do feel like saying this. currently I've been doing the 2 videos a week, one more science fiction-y, one like this that's more story-based. I don't necessarily intend to continue that going forward. I don't know when I may stop. It depends. I do want to try to keep to 1 video a week, but it might be like I do just science fiction video. It might be I do just a story video. I don't know. Just gonna see how that goes. But I am starting to run low on ideas that I had when I started the channel. So it's just saying that. So see you next time. Maybe it'll be a story video. Maybe it'll be a science fiction video. But in any case, I'll see you then.